Good morning. We're continuing with Megillat Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes, in the third section of the Bible, known as Ketuvim. A reminder, we've said that Kohelet wants you to think that he's really King Solomon, living sometime around the year 900 BCE. But from the point of view of reading literarily, it's clear the language and the ideas are more situated in the 3rd century, 2nd century BCE. And he's really just pretending to be Solomon, either so that people will take him seriously, or it's historical fiction, and he's pretending so that based on the life and the experience of Solomon, he is justified in saying what he's saying. Another thing that we've seen so far is that, and the more I read and reread this, the more it seems like we're dealing with somebody who is older and reflecting on his life, and not necessarily a happy camper, to the extent that the more I read it, the more I get the sense that here is somebody who may be suffering from bipolar disorder. He sometimes just wants to end it all and is so depressed, and at other times he really says, you got to be happy, you got to enjoy things when you can. What's amazing is that we see him ping-ponging back and forth between these two poles. It's not like, wakes up this way and later in the day he's that way. We're going from sentence 4 to sentence 5, and we see this tremendous change in his attitude. And ultimately, what we get from all of his musings about life is that on the one hand, it's ridiculous to work hard, because ultimately, what's it for? You're going to die and you're not going to enjoy life. But you're a fool if you just say, live for the moment, and that's all there is. Going back and forth between his different poles, ultimately the author of Kohelet is going to come somewhere in the middle. And he's going to basically be advising us. Who knows what tomorrow brings? The best thing you can do is, when happiness comes your way, embrace it, enjoy it, because you don't know what's going to be tomorrow. So it's not eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. It's not quite as extreme as that. And it's not, I'm going to work till I'm 65 and then I'm going to retire and I'm going to cruise the world. You're a fool if you put off anything for the future. There's a place in the middle. And ultimately, as depressed as Kohelet sometimes seems to be, that's the ultimate wisdom of the book. So we're in chapter 4, and here we go. I got to also tell you, remember last week we played Pete Seeger and To Everything, Turn, 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 which of course is based on chapter 3 of the book of Ecclesiastes. We were fine during the class. When Rich went later to post it on YouTube, through YouTube on our website, we got in trouble. We got a warning for misuse of copyrighted material, and this was our first warning. So we got to be careful. Somebody is watching out for the rights that should have gone to Pete Seeger, but which we didn't pay him for. So that was fascinating to know the way that the internet is watching more than we're aware. So let's dive in, chapter 4, and he tells us the following. V'shavti ani, I further observed, or literally, I came back, and that idea of returning, gives us more of this sense of this guy who's bouncing from here to there and back again. Shavti ani ve'er'eh et kol ha'ashukim. And I observed all the oppression, asher na'asim tachat hashamesh, the terrible things that happen in life to people. Asher na'asim tachat hashamesh, that happen under the sun. V'hinei dimat ha'ashukim. And I saw the tears of those who are oppressed. And then very powerfully he says, V'yein lahem menachem, and there is no one to comfort them. Okay, so here's a man pretending to be the king. If he was the king, he could have done something to help people. But pretending to be the king, he doesn't have that power. And he says, so many people are crying because of oppression, and there's no one to comfort them. Miyad oshkehem ko ve'ein lahem menachem. Nobody to stop the oppression and to comfort those who are oppressed. Verse 2, V'shabeach ani, and so therefore I praised et hametim shekvar metu. I praised the dead, people who have already died. Right? How morbid can you get? I envy the dead, he's telling us. Min hachayim, over people who are alive. Dead people aren't being oppressed. Dead people aren't crying without people to comfort them. Asher hema chayim adena. I feel bad for the people who are alive. What's going to become of them? And then he says, he gets even more morbid, verse 3, V'tov mishnehem, and better than either the living or the dead, et asher aden lo haya, people who never were born. The living have to suffer now. The dead, okay, no more suffering, but while they were alive, they suffered plenty. You know who I really admire? People who have never yet been born. They haven't had to go through any of this. Asher lo ra'ah et ha'ma'aseh hara. They never saw, never experienced evil things. Asher na'asa tachat hashamash. Those things which occur under the sun. Verse 4. V'ra'iti et kol amal. I saw all the labor, all the toil, all the travail. V'et kol kishron hama'aseh, all the talents and the skillful enterprise, it says here, that people devote, ki hi kinat ish mereehu, which people use and engage in order, because they are jealous of the guy who has next door, who has a better house or a better car or more money in the bank or a better vacation. He said, I saw all the jealousy that people have and all the energy that they devote to trying to equal or better the guy next door. Gamze hevel ureut ruach. And as he's been telling us in every chapter, this is mere breath and it's hurting of the wind. If you're going to spend your life trying to be as good as or better and have things that are as good as or better than your neighbor, you're wasting your time, because it's all here, the breath, and then it's gone, and then what do you have? Verse 5, Hakasil chovek et yadav. And now he's, going back and forth. Remember, he started, I devoted myself to wisdom, and then I realized, what's the point? So maybe just being a fool and grabbing whatever you see. But now he says in verse 5, Hakasil, the fool, chovek et yadav, folds his hands together and has to eat his own flesh. V'ochel et bisaro. Very strange image that he gives us. Is he telling us this? Somebody who is, wringing his hands because nothing is working out? Or does it mean chovek? Is he like holding himself? We just said there's no one to comfort him. And here he is. Is he trying to like hold on to himself, comfort himself? And then, even more graphic, we're told, V'ochel et bisaro. He eats his own flesh. Is the picture of somebody who is so tormented, he's biting his knuckles? Or is it somebody maybe who is, not saying a word? What can you say? How can you answer the terrible things that happen? And maybe he's like biting the inside of his cheek, to hold in whatever, terrors and anguish he has about the world. So this incredible picture, that he draws us in verse 5. And this is the guy who, the fool, who doesn't realize the way the world works and is constantly disappointed by it. So verse 6, Tov, and now it's like he's going to bounce to the other side of the room. Tov melo chaf nachat. Better is to have a one handful of something, whatever it is. Better to have a handful of something that you get with nachat. From the Yiddish word nachas, joy. Nachat literally means at peace. That came, you got the handful, but you didn't have to kill yourself. You didn't have to exert yourself. It came easy. So he's telling us here, better to have a handful that came easy, right? Mimlo chofnaim, than, two handfuls or a giant bagful that comes with amal, with toil and travail and re'ut ruah. Don't try to be the richest guy. Don't try to acquire everything. One handful, right, is better than breaking your neck and having a lot. So again, this middle position of, yes, I want you to enjoy. That's all there is in life. But don't go overboard. Don't become so acquisitive that it's all about how much. And no matter what you have, I want more. It's never enough. To him, one handful that comes, whatever it is, easily, that's the best that he could tell us. Verse 7, V'shavti ani, and once again, he uses that same term that he started with. And I came back, I returned, right? Here they translate it as, I have noted this further. Ve'areh hevel tachat hashamesh. And I have seen the futility or the meaninglessness or, the mere breath of everything under the sun. Verse 8, Yesh echad, there is one person, V'ein sheni, and there isn't a second person, a guy alone. He's talking about loneliness, more than loneliness, being alone, right? Gam bein va'ach ein lo. He has no son, he has no brother. Ve'ein kates lechol amalo. And there is no end to all the trouble and the travail. Gam eino lo tispa osher. His eye will never be satisfied with whatever wealth. Ulami ani amel. And he asks himself, because he's all alone, who am I working for? Umechaser et nafshi mitova. Right? He's denying himself along the road any kind of joy because he's all alone and there's nobody to share it with. Gamze hevel ve'inyan ra hu. This too is a waste, and it's a very bad thing in life. And now in verse 9, one of the famous lines from the book of Ecclesiastes, Tovim hashnayim min ha'echad. Two are better than one. Remember, he just told us how terrible it is to be alone and have nobody to share with. And so he ultimately tells us, Tovim hashnayim min ha'echad. Asher yesh lahem sachar tov ba'amalam. They have greater benefit from all the things that they acquire. We might have thought that when he said two are better than one, that might have led him into perhaps a romantic musing about how wonderful it is to have a life partner, be it a man, a woman, somebody that you can go through life with and share. But at least here, later on maybe Kohelet will. We'll see when we get there. But right now, that's not the direction that he goes in. Two are better than one. It's not about you should go out and get married. Instead, he's really talking about a partner of some kind. Okay? Because he says two are better than one, and then in verse 10, Ki im yiklu ha'echad, because if one falls, yakim et chavero. Ha'echad, the other one can help to raise up his friend. Notice chavero. Okay? Could mean partner, but chaver also means a friend. So two are walking together and one falls. You've got the other guy who's there, to help me. I've fallen and I can't get up. You don't need the pendant. You got somebody who's walking along the road with you. So having somebody to go through life with is always better. But again, doesn't seem to be indicating a romantic partner. This is more a business partner or a friend. Because if you're all alone and you fall, then you got to depend on that pendant and the 911 being called and coming to pick you up. Otherwise, you're in big trouble. Now, remember, we've said that Kohelet probably writing in the 200s BCE. Sometime later, maybe 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century CE. So we're talking about 300, 400, 500 years later. Along come the rabbis. And the rabbis read the Bible and they create their own commentaries or their own literary works based on the Bible. And that, of course, is called Midrash. Midrash, there are dozens and dozens of different midrashim, of books, collections of midrashim. Some of them go back to the 1st century, 2nd century. Some of them go, even Midrash is being collected and created even through the 10th century and the 11th century. But the classical period is 200, 300 CE. Again, for 500 years after this book is written. And the rabbis, go sometimes line by line, word by word, and they come up with what was meaningful for them. They use the Bible as a springboard to say something else. So I want to give you an example. I'm reading from Midrash Rabbah. Midrash Rabbah is a collection of the most famous collection of Midrashim, and it goes according to the Torah, each of the books of the Torah, and there are Midrashim collections on each of the 5 Megillot, the scrolls in Song of Songs and Esther and Lamentations, and of course here, and Ruth, and we've got Ecclesiastes. So the rabbis are going to come up with at least 6 different explanations and interpretations of 2 are better than 1. And so I want to share some of those with you. So here they go. 2 are better than 1 when they study Torah together. If one of them forgets a halacha, and that's how they interpret if one of them falls. In other words, fails to remember something that he learned, the other can restore it to him. So in other words, the scholar who sits alone and studies, that's not the Jewish approach. As we've said before, Jews study in chavruta, at least minimally 2 people across a table when they study in a yeshiva, so that each person can bring a different view. This guy knows more than the other guy knows more than this guy. Together, right, they make a good study group, as opposed to trying to do it yourself. And then when it says, we're going to read a little further on, back in verse 11, it says, Gam im yishkavu shnayim v'cham lahem. So too, if they sleep, they lay down together, 2 of them, they are able to warm each other. Ule echad ech yecham. But if there is one person alone, he's going to be cold. And again, it doesn't seem, it would have been obvious to talk about husband and wife, right? And that they bring warmth to one another. Kohelet doesn't go there. He seems to be hinting at 2 men who share a bed and help to warm each other. But before we jump to conclusions, we're not talking about gay men, right? We're talking about, and you may remember a number of years ago, there was a controversy because when people read the biography of Lincoln before he got married, when he was a single guy, a bachelor, when he was on the road, he often would share his bed with somebody. And a few people said, well, that proves that Abraham Lincoln was gay. No, it proves that back in the day, this was what people did when there wasn't a radiator and there wasn't heat and it was wintertime. And of course, you remember Moby Dick and the very famous scene of Ishmael in the very beginning of the movie or of the book, first chapters, Ishmael who shares his bed at the inn with Queequeg, the native person, and no one is jumping to the conclusion that, oh, these guys were gay. This apparently was what was done in the 19th century and apparently for 2,000 years or more before that. And then we read in the end of verse 12, Ve'im yitkafu ha'echad hashnaim yamdu negdo. If one person attacks you and you're all alone, it's 50-50 if you're going to survive. But two people can stand up to him. And then we have this amazing end of this parable, of this proverb, two are better than one. And then we read the following, V'hachut hamishulash lo bimheira yinatek. A threefold cord is not readily broken or not easily cut. So what they're basically saying is 2 is better than 1 and 3 is even better. The idea of, you tie 2 strings together, makes them stronger. But if you have 3 strings that are tied, how much stronger is 3 than 2? So back to the rabbis in the Midrash, you'll remember that we said the first explanation was 2 people, 2 are better than 1 when they're studying Torah. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. This refers to the teacher who corrects their mistake for them. So it's not enough just to have a study partner. You also need a teacher who knows better than either of you, right? When you come to the wrong conclusion or you are stumped completely, it's the third one, the teacher, who can set you on the right way. So again, first explanation, 2 are better than 1, has to deal with learning. They bring us a second interpretation. When they transact business in partnership. If one of them falls and is in danger, his fellow can raise him up. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken when there are 3 in partnership. So again, the idea that this applies not just to studying Torah, but it also applies in business. If you're alone and you're sick, who's going to open up the store? What are you going to do? But if you're in partnership, then 2 of you can work together. You can do twice the business. You can take a vacation. If you're sick, he can open up for you, right? So the second interpretation is about business. Listen to the third one. When Rabbi Meir was a student of the generation after Rabbi Akiba. So we're talking about 125 to 175 CE. When Rabbi Meir saw a man go into the open street alone, he used to cry out to him, "Go in peace, O master of death." In other words, you go out at night alone. In those days, you're going to get yourself killed. And he used to say, when he saw 2, he used to cry out to them, "Peace be upon you, O masters of strife." There's liable to be a quarrel if 2 people are walking. But when he saw 3, he used to cry out to them, "Peace be with you, O masters of peace." So in other words, when there's 3 people who are walking, number 1, you're safer, and number 2, if there's an argument between the 2, the third guy can say, "You know what, you're wrong, he's right," and it's done with. How are you going to solve a problem if there's 2 people and they're each set in their ways? Okay, it's going to lead to a fight, maybe even to violence. So to Rabbi Meir, the idea of don't go out on your own refers to security. Remember, this is in a period of terrible Roman oppression. And we can imagine not only the Romans were going to get you, there were brigands and robbers and muggers and murderers and thieves, everybody looking to make it easier for themselves. Finally, the rabbis, 500 years after Kohelet, they come to what I think many of us would have assumed would be the obvious answer. Rabbi Yochanan made two statements in this connection. He said, two are better, in other words, a husband and wife, than one, than each separately. And a threefold cord, this alludes to the Holy One, blessed be He, who grants them children. So this is a beautiful idea. Thank you, Rabbi Yochanan, finally, 3rd century CE, who says two are better than one, better you should be married, right? And when we're talking about a threefold cord, it's the husband, the wife, and God, who becomes a partner in marriage and enables the husband and wife to have children. So, and then his second comment is he gives us an example of Amram and Yocheved. Quick test. Who were Amram and Yocheved? Parents of Moses, right? So because you had a man and a woman who got together, and according to the rabbinic Midrash, when Pharaoh said, kill all the Jewish babies, they said, we better split up. We don't want to have any children who are going to be murdered by the Egyptians. And Miriam, their young daughter, said to them, Pharaoh was going to get rid of everybody, just the boys. But you're going to get rid of a boy or a girl. You got to get back together. So according to the Midrash, their daughter brought them back together. Two are better than one. That's about marriage. And then we come later and we read the following. Rabbi said, two are better refers to Mordechai and Esther than if each had acted separately. Now remember the story. Haman wants to destroy the Jews. Esther is afraid to tell the king that she's a Jew. On her own, she never would have gone to the king and never would have started the process that led to the downfall of Haman. Mordechai, on the other hand, he was hanging out in sackcloth and ashes in the street. He didn't have the power, but he had the vision and the will. He goes to Esther and says, you better do something. She said, king hasn't seen me in 30 days. I could get in trouble. And he says to her, maybe this is the reason that you were chosen in the first place as queen, so that you would be in this position at this moment to save us. And if you don't do anything, I guarantee that God will find another way. But don't think you're going to save yourself. Word is going to get out that you're a Jew somehow, and Haman's going to come after you. If you didn't have Mordechai and Esther, Purim wouldn't have happened. Just a Mordechai or just an Esther, each one on their own was insufficient. Okay, so, and a threefold cord. Who's the third person? It's Achashverosh. It's the king who agreed with them and issued the decree that said, write concerning the Jews, whatever you want to do in the king's name, it's okay by me. So Esther and Mordechai, with the king's seal and permission, basically tell the Jews throughout the kingdom, they're coming after us, but the king will let us fight back. So number 5 is politically. You want to change the world, you can't do it on your own. You need others. You need maybe a backing. You need political party. And then we read the 6th interpretation, which is sort of a follow-up to Mordechai and Esther. Another interpretation of two are better. It refers to Moses and Aaron. Than if each had acted separately. You find that when Moses came and blessed Israel, the Shekhinah, the presence of God, did not rest upon Israel through him. But when they both came and blessed Israel, the Shekhinah at once rested upon Israel through them, as it is written, Leviticus 9, verse 23. And Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting and came out and blessed the people. They blessed Israel, and then the glory of the Lord appeared unto all the people. So that was the Shekhinah resting upon Israel through them. And remember the story of Moses and Aaron, it's similar to the story of Mordechai and Esther. Moses is the one with the connections to God, but Moses doesn't have the self-confidence, doesn't have the skill as a speaker. It's Aaron who becomes the public voice of Moses, and it's together that they're successful and that they work. So the rabbis in the Midrash, two are better than one when it comes to learning, when it comes to business, when it comes to your security, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to politics. These are, it's always better to have somebody with you. So we have two are better than one, but a threefold cord is not easily broken. Which brings us to verse 13. So we read the following: Tov Yeled Miskein V'Chacham. Better a poor but wise youth, Mimelech Zakein Ukesil, than a foolish king who no longer has the sense to heed warnings. One has to wonder if Kohelet here, the author pretending to be Solomon and pretending to be talking about himself, who lived 700 years before, one wonders if the author was really making a sharp political comment about whoever was in charge, whoever was the king in the 3rd century BCE. And by writing, better to have somebody poor and smart than somebody who is old and stupid, right? Was this really a sharp dig at leadership? But if leadership read this, somebody said to the king, "Did you see what this guy wrote about you?" Kohelet, or the guy pretending to be Kohelet, said, "What are you talking about? I didn't mention the king's name. If anything, I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about, Solomon." That idea. So whether this was a sharp political contemporary critique of leadership at the time, we'll never know, but it certainly is possible. A foolish king who is old, not so smart, right? Now we're going back to this dyad of smart versus stupid. Which way do I want to go? And then he comes in verse 14 and he adds, Ki mi beit ha-surim yatsa limloch. The former, meaning somebody who's poor but smart, you can ultimately rise and become king. Ki gam b'malchuto nolad rash. Somebody, who was even the latter, even if he was born to kingship, he can become a pauper. Perhaps what we have in mind is Joseph, who was brought out of the dungeon and ultimately becomes second to Pharaoh. Or maybe it's, a hidden dig at the son of Solomon, Rehoboam, who ultimately, was stupid, not like his father, and ended up losing most of his kingdom because he didn't follow the wise advice of his father's counselors, right? So that's what we have there. So we pick it up with verse 15. Ra'iti et kol ha'chayim. I reflected about all those who are alive. Hamahalchim tachat hashamash. Those who are walking under the sun. Im hayeled hasheni asher ya'amod tachtav. That youthful successor who steps into his place, right? The king who works so hard, makes so much money, and then his son will come and succeed him without having done all of that work. And again, how frustrating that must seem after a lifetime of doing it. Verse 16, Ein kates lechol ha'am, lechol asher haya lifnehem. Unnumbered are the multitudes of all those who preceded them. Gam ha'acharonim, and later generations will not acclaim him either. Lo yismechu bo gam ki gam zeh hevel v'rayon ruach. And they're going to forget, ultimately, at the end of time, they're going to forget the first king who worked so hard, the second king who was stupid and who blew it all. I got news for you, he says. They're not going to remember Solomon. They're not going to remember Rehoboam. Both of them will be forgotten. And then we come to the final verse, which actually belongs with the next chapter. I've got to tell you that the chapters that we see in the Bible were not created by the authors or by the Jews. It was ultimately the Christians reading the Bible who put into the books of the Bible the chapter headings. Sometimes they did it at the right places. Sometimes they clearly did it at places that don't make much sense. And Jews later adopted those chapter headings, even though that's not the way that we normally would divide stories or sections. So the last verse in chapter 4, we'll read next week as we begin chapter 5, but we'll do it just because, to see the end of the chapter. So verse 17 says, Shemor raglecha, watch your feet, watch where you're walking. Ka'asher telech, when you go, el beit ha'elohim, to the house of God. This is an interesting way to refer to it. We always in the Bible would refer to the temple as the Beit HaMikdash. Certainly that's how it's later understood, the temple. But here it seems to say Beit HaElohim, the house of the God. Is that referring to the temple in Jerusalem? Is that referring to local synagogues which grew up and which people went to not in order to sacrifice, which you only could do in the temple, but they went to in order to hear the Torah read or perhaps to offer prayers or sing psalms and praises to God? At any rate, Kohelet is telling us, be careful or watch out when you go to the synagogue or the temple. V'karov lishmoa, more acceptable, it's nearer, it's closer, it's better to listen. Mitet hakesilim zavach, stupid people who believe that it's all about bringing a sacrifice, and they think you bring the sacrifice and you're good with God. You show up, you do what you were supposed to do, God is happy with you. And Kohelet is basically saying, not so quick, not so fast. Better that you listen to the word of God, rather than show up religiously in shul or in temple, sacrificing and praying. Better the way you behave than your ritual, the things that you do ritually. Ke'inam yodim la'asot ra. And we're told here, for they know nothing but to do wrong. These people who think all you have to do, fast on Yom Kippur, you cover the main details and God is going to be happy with you. But you continue to do wrong. Or you do wrong and you think, I bring a sacrifice and my hands are clean. Forget it. That's stupidity. You're going to get yourself. There is a God. He's not this personal God that we understand today. He's this distant God. And you do wrong, la'asot ra, somehow the karma will come back and will bite you. So that's chapter 4, and we'll pick it up next week, and we will see how this trend continues. So wishing you all the best.